Well, let's talk about in our first video of Chapter 7 what we can actually do with .NET inside of integration services. So this is kind of where we are. You see the layout. This is, like I said in the last video, our last lecture mode video of this particular set. So everything else is going to be demo. I kind of laugh when I think of this question because you actually do get this if I'm teaching a class or if I'm talking with a novice SQL Server person or .NET person who doesn't really know integration services. They will ask this question, what can I do with .NET inside of integration services? And it's one of those questions that, after you've worked with SSIS and .NET for a while, you kind of chuckle because it's a hard question to answer. I think about it like this. So here is, let's see if I can do this. I don't know if I can give this justice or not, but like here are all the things that .NET can do. Okay, so let's say that blue is the capabilities of the .NET framework. And then here, and we'll use red here, here are all the things that SSIS can do. So you can see that there are things that .NET can do that SSIS cannot do. That's at least what this is meant to imply. So like, you know, these right here, these are all the sections that SSIS can do inside of .NET. I don't know if this diagram really works or not. I'll try to use it. What I mean to show you with this is that .NET is massive. It's huge. What the .NET framework can do is well beyond SSIS. Okay, SSIS has this very well-defined domain. We're working with data flow. We're an ETL tool, right? And you're trying to extract, transform, and load. Sure, it has all these other capabilities as well, like processing cubes and executing other kind of SQL scripts and such. But primarily, it's an ETL tool, and it has a fairly minor scope. Whereas if you compare it to something like .NET has this massive scope of things that it could do. So here's how I kind of visualize it. This is kind of how I think about it. Everything that SSIS can do could be done without SSIS. And it could all be done using .NET. Now, it would be a pain in the ankle to actually write the code to do it, but can we actually load up a text file from and load it into a SQL server using .NET without ever using SSIS? Oh, you betcha. Could we export data from Oracle to a text file and then load that text file up into SQL Server using bulk insert? Do that within .NET? Absolutely. .NET has all of the capabilities to do these things. SSIS is simply a more friendly, a more optimized, a less code maintenance type of way to do that. It's a tool that in many cases actually does all the .NET stuff for you behind the scenes. So .NET can do a ton of stuff that SSIS can do. SSIS, really trying to think of situations, but there's really almost, at least like off the top of my head, there's nothing, see if I can say this without a double or a triple negative. There's nothing that SSIS can't do that .NET can't also do. I did triple. I was trying to work in a quadruple negative, but it didn't work. Let's say that in a more positive way. Everything that SSIS can do, .NET could do without using SSIS. Now, sure, there's probably situations where that's not the case, but they are few and far between. So that's why I put .NET in this massive little bubble here, and SSIS just this small part of it. So asking me what can .NET do within SSIS is just not fair because you can do all this stuff. Now, there's a better question I think that could be asked, and that is, what would I probably do with .NET? Or what are the typical uses of .NET within SSIS? And that's somewhat of what I've tried to focus on for Chapter 7. Not every possible thing, but the things that you're likely to have to do. So let me erase this and let's kind of continue. We've already actually played with .NET a couple of times. While we were doing package development, we popped up little pop-up messages to show us the value of a variable. We used a little bit of a timer. You remember doing that in some of the earlier packages. Now, those were only development. We would never do those types of things, little pop-up messages and such, in a production level package. But during development, it sure does help us figure out what's going on, right? For production use, that's where we replaced the send mail task. Remember, the problems with the send mail task are that you can't really provide a username and password for a Gmail account or a non-intranet based email service. We also did a little bit of work with the script component. We're going to do a little bit more of that as we develop here. Now, here's that answer to that question. What do we typically use .NET for? This was, this is a hard question to answer too, because put yourself in my situation. You know, we had that big, massive circle of the things that .NET can do, right? And so now imagine that there are literally thousands of people coming to you, watching your SSIS 2008 course, asking you, what do we typically do? Well, because the .NET framework is so massive and because the work with SSIS can be so all-encompassing and cover so many different areas, some people are always going to do this. Some people are always going to do that. And so it kind of makes it difficult to say this is typically what everybody uses. But I've tried to come up with a little bit of a list. But please understand, we're dealing with, in .NET and SSIS, two massive topics. And I might have missed something that you typically will use .NET for in SSIS. That's okay. Doesn't mean that other people don't also typically use it. I just tried to pick out ones that I thought would resonate with most of the people that use both .NET and SSIS. And I tried to keep them pretty generic too. So let's just kind of step down the list here. One of the things is adding in functionality that's not already done. So, like maybe this would be custom assemblies. Maybe you have some sort of a product that, trying to think of some good ones, that does regular expression data scrubbing. And you'd like to bring that into SSIS, but there wasn't anything built in natively. Well, guess what? You could actually write it, or you could use a third-party tool to do that for you. Number two, you could replace the built-in tasks, like we did this with the send mail task, right? Because the send mail task just did not give us what we needed. Extending functionality of built-in tasks. Maybe your data flow task does most of what you want, but you needed to bring the script component in to dynamically create variables, to do some other things that maybe aren't exposed natively, and making your package more dynamic. In other words, I want to, at runtime, I want to find out the name. I want to create a connection at runtime. I want to find out what columns that SSIS discovers, and I want to create a destination at runtime, all on the fly without having to have done this previously. So there's a lot of things that we do, but those are some pretty typical uses of SSIS of .NET in SSIS. Now, there are a couple of new features in 2008 that .NET developers care about. I know that we covered all of these back in Chapter 1 when we talked about what's new. Just kind of seemed like it made sense to revisit that here, though. So we can now do C#. Previously, in the old VSA, we could only do VB. The coding environment is now the VSTA. So it used to be the VSA in 2005, and we could only use VB. That was the reason. The VSTA, the Visual Studio Tools for Applications, VSTA, allows not only just VB and C Sharp, but this is a full-blown environment for working with .NET. You can use pretty much all of the framework that you want. It makes it so much easier to use things that are stored in the global assembly cache, the GAC, the GAC, or to use your own custom assemblies and load them up. Previously, it was a bit of a nightmare in 2005. So the VSTA environment, it's really going to make your life a lot easier as a .NET developer. There aren't any new features per se outside of what's really listed on here. You can take advantage of whatever the .NET framework installed on the server is, but there's no technical new features outside of that. One thing that you have to at least consider is if you're migrating a package from 2005 to 2008. Well, you used the old VSA with Visual Basic in 2005. When you migrate it to 2008, is it automatically going to upgrade it to the VSTA? Is it going to change the language to C Sharp? No, it will upgrade it to VSA, but it's not going to rewrite the code for you. The only real gotcha is if you were designing custom components. So if you were writing your own tasks and you wanted some sort of a visual element to those, you would have to implement or you'd have to use the DTS 9.0 interfaces. So they all were IDTS and then whatever the name 9.0. Okay. So you'll have to manually update those to the new version. The chances are you weren't writing your own custom UI components, so you don't really probably have to care. I did want to include a few things that should help make your life easier. Number one, what I am trying to do has likely been attempted thousands of times already. In other words, don't reinvent the wheel, right? If you're trying to do something that in your head you think, gosh, this seems like people have done it before, look, okay? Don't just start off trying to reinvent the wheel. Go use a search engine and learn to use a search engine well. That's a different skill than just using a search engine. Post a question in a forum. Can't find it in a search engine, ask. My favorite forums for this, by the way, tend to just be the Microsoft forum. They're on the MSDN website. And there are many instances where you can actually, for a very small amount, you can actually pay for a solution that's already been done for you. For example, you want to have, what was something I saw recently? I don't want to mention something without mentioning a company name, and I try to shy away from mentioning and endorsing third-party companies in my videos. Let's just say that there are easy ways to snap into working with IBM-based databases, and you can buy your own, or you can purchase third-party products that will do this a little more efficiently for you. There are a lot of companies that write custom-built tasks. So they do a lot of the things that you would have to spend 3 to 5 days coding up and managing and testing yourself. And for $99, you could just go buy it. And it would save you so much time, and it probably would be better written anyway. So don't be afraid to purchase some of the third-party tasks, third-party connections, because in my experience, they really do what they say they're going to do. And most importantly, they save me a ton of time. So we're here. We finished with chapter 7. I think it's time now that we go on and talk about using variables.